Hello, it's an early edition of Fantasy Football Insider. I'm Dan Labbe, he is Chris Fedor, and we're here with you for the next 15-20 minutes to answer your questions about fantasy football. But Chris, let's start here. AJ Green. A lot of people survived a scare a few weeks ago, and then yesterday carted off the field, threw a shoe, apparently, in disgust.
Who throws a shoe?
I don't know.
Honestly.
AJ Green, apparently,
Right.
when he may re-injure his toe.
And the dude from Austin Powers, too.
Yeah, that guy also. And the guy that threw a shoe at George Bush.
Yeah, that guy. So a lot of people, apparently.
That's 3 people that throw shoes. If you own AJ Green, and obviously we don't have an update on him yet, we don't know if it's as serious as it appears. If you own AJ Green, though, what are you doing?
I would suggest 2 things. Number 1, you always want to handcuff running backs, right? Everybody talks about if you have a star running back like Arian Foster, you want to have the backup in Alfred Blue. If you have LaShawn McCoy, you want to have Darren Sproles. You want to have somebody that you can just plug right into your roster from the same team and not take a huge, huge step back. At least you have some kind of option. So if you have AJ Green, the first thing that I would try and do, Dan, I would go out to the waiver wire right now and see if Mohamed Sanu is available from the Bengals. Because the other guy that some people would look at is Marvin Jones, but it doesn't look like he's going to be back because he was coming back from a foot injury, then he tweaks his ankle. So the guy, I think, if AJ Green is going to be out, that's going to see more targets, more opportunities, is Mohamed Sanu. So if you have AJ Green, make sure you handcuff AJ Green with Mohamed Sanu because he would be the go-to target for Andy Dalton. The second thing is, Dan, you just wait it out and you hope. You hope for the best because you understand AJ Green is a weak winner for you. He's somebody who can go out and get you 20 to 30 points. He can have those multiple touchdown games. So cross your fingers, pray, hope that it's not too serious. Marvin Lewis said earlier this morning on Sirius XM radio, he was asked if it's turf toe. A lot of people thought it was turf toe at the beginning. He said it's something more than that.
Oh boy.
So that's not a good sign.
Yeah, definitely not. Some other injuries out there. Monty Ball left the game Sunday. He's expected to be out for a while. He's been a disappointment.
Yeah, I mean,
but a lot of fantasy owners still were counting on him to maybe get his season turned around a little bit. What now?
Right, especially because if you look towards the end of the schedule, the back half of the schedule, weeks 10 to 13, things get easier. Monty Ball's had a tough go of it, playing against some really good run defenses. Just look at this past week. Arizona came into that game, they were a top 5 run defense, so it wasn't a surprise that Ball struggled before getting hurt. And of course, they played against Seattle, and everybody knows how good Seattle's defense is. So part of his struggles at the beginning of the year, Dan, he just has had this really difficult schedule. The other part of it is he's not very good. He doesn't have great vision. He doesn't have great explosiveness. They're not getting him involved in the pass-catching game the way that they did with Noshawn Moreno last year. So if you have Monty Ball, you're looking at maybe week 10, 11 when he comes back, and then you're hoping that he regains his job. And there's no guarantee of that because now the opportunity is going to be there for a guy like Ronnie Hillman or C.J. Anderson. Those 2 guys, if they start to play well, better than Monty Ball, and before he got hurt, Monty Ball was under 4 yards per carry, they could take the job, they could run with it. The thing that I would say, John Fox is somebody, Dan, who has always leaned towards a veteran guy, somebody who's been in the NFL, somebody who's been in a particular system. So I think the edge, if you're looking at trying to go to the waiver wire and get one of those Denver running backs, me personally, I think the edge is going to go to Ronnie Hillman over Juwan Thompson and C.J. Anderson, just because Hillman's been in Denver for the longest time.
Who are some of these other injuries that have started to crop up that worry you? Calvin Johnson, a guy, Megatron. People were counting on him, and now he might be shut down for a little bit.
For fantasy owners, the worst thing that has happened here, Dan, in the last 2 weeks is that he's played. Because when Calvin Johnson plays, you can't take him out of the lineup.
Yeah.
But he's clearly not 100%, and they've used him for 2 straight weeks as a decoy. Rather than just sitting him, letting that high ankle sprain rest and maybe have him towards their playoff push, they've put him out there. They've used him as a decoy. He's putting more stress on that ankle. I think this week they're going to sit him. I think they are. I think they understand that they need to get him 100%. If they continue to put him out there and just use him as a decoy, monitor his snap count, he's not going to get the kind of rest, the kind of treatment that he's going to need on that ankle, and it's going to be a lingering issue all season long. Yeah. Golden Tate is somebody, He's probably not available anymore at the beginning of the year. Not everybody drafted Golden Tate. If you're in a 10-team league, maybe Golden Tate's going to be out there. But without Calvin Johnson, that obviously diminishes the value a little bit of Matthew Stafford. He's a different quarterback without Calvin Johnson. It increases the value of Golden Tate. It probably increases the value, too, of running back Joique Bell, who's expected to be back after missing a game because of a concussion, and Reggie Bush dinged up again. Who would have thunk that?
At the tight end position, a guy that I have, a guy that's going to drive some fantasy owners crazy because maybe you picked him a little higher than you're supposed to pick a tight end because of who he is, Vernon Davis.
Yeah.
Ruled out kind of late last week. Maybe he'll be back this week. If you've got Vernon Davis, what should you be doing? Should you be planning on starting him, or should you have a reliable backup ready to go?
I think you should have a reliable backup ready to go, and a couple of guys that stand out to me, Eric Ebron, somebody from Detroit. If Calvin Johnson is going to be dinged, they're going to need somebody else to help that passing game. Ebron had a couple of opportunities early in the game last week to get touchdowns. Didn't happen for him. Did get one touchdown, though. So you're talking about somebody who's getting a bigger role in the past 2 games. And the other tight end there, Joseph Foria, everybody knows all about him. He's got an ankle injury, so that just means more opportunity for Eric Ebron. He's somebody that's available in a lot of fantasy leagues. And Dan, I think another guy that could be a really, really sneaky pickup is Jordan Reed from Washington. A lot of people felt like he could be a top 10 fantasy tight end this year. Been dealing with a couple of different injuries. He is expected to be back this week for the Washington Redskins. Kirk Cousins, he doesn't have a great arm, so oftentimes he wants to make the right play. He wants to throw the ball to a security blanket. Jordan Reed is a guy who could finally have that kind of value that you expected when you drafted him, but because he was hurt at the beginning of the year, a lot of people dropped him. He could be available on the waiver wires.
Let's look at quarterbacks because I think Robert Griffin III is an interesting scenario for fantasy owners because Kirk Cousins, like you mentioned him, doesn't have a great arm. He's not a great quarterback. We've seen that he's very inconsistent. Robert Griffin III could be back. I'm seeing here they're targeting like a week 11 return from him. If I own RG3, should I still own RG3? And B, should I hang on to him?
I would say that you're okay to drop RG3 at this point. If you're somebody, let's say you're looking at your roster, right, and you want to go to the waiver wire and you want to pick up one of the big names that is still out there, and some waiver wires don't go until this afternoon. It's kind of weird. Most of them went overnight, but some are this afternoon. So let's say you're looking out there and you're like, okay, I want Brandon Oliver from the San Diego Chargers, a hot name. I want Ronnie Hillman from the Broncos. I want Andre Williams from the New York Giants. I don't know who on my roster I should be able to drop here. You don't feel good about dropping one of your wide receivers because you're good there. You don't feel good about dropping a running back just to get another running back. You don't want to drop that second tight end because maybe you do have Vernon Davis and he's got that injury history. You don't want to drop a defense because you're somebody who has 2 defenses and you always go with the better matchup. Then I think you can drop RG3 because there's so many quarterbacks out there in fantasy football and different ones emerge any given week. Austin Davis was one of the highest scoring fantasy quarterbacks last week. Who saw that coming? Austin Davis. He was the 3rd string quarterback in St. Louis to begin the year, Dan. But that's what happens at quarterback. Blake Bortles could emerge. Teddy Bridgewater could emerge as he's coming back from his ankle issue. So for now, you know that you're not going to have RG3 until the end of October. If you need a roster spot, the backup quarterback to me, Dan, is always the one that I'd be the quickest to drop just because of the depth of that position. And another guy that you could potentially pick up as you move forward here if you need another quarterback is Carson Palmer, because a lot of people dropped Carson Palmer because he's dealing with that nerve issue in his shoulder. If he comes back, then you just go to the waiver wire, you try and grab him. So if you need a free roster spot, my suggestion is drop that second quarterback on your roster because you can get somebody of his value a little bit later down the road.
All right, let's talk waiver wire. Let's talk free agents. A lot of people trying to kind of rebuild their teams on the fly here if they're off to a bad start.
Yep.
So who's out there that can at least help turn a season around?
I think Andre Williams would be the first guy that I would target from the New York Giants. Rashad Jennings was the 4th leading rusher in the NFL this year. before he got hurt. And it's a sprained MCL, and that can be 2 weeks, that can be 3 weeks, that can be 4 weeks. They've got a bye week coming up here shortly, so maybe they rest him through the bye week. And Andre Williams is a guy that can help you win a couple of games and build some momentum going into the fantasy playoffs. So he would be the first guy that I would target. Brandon Oliver in San Diego is the second guy that I would target. He just, he looks like Darren Sproles. He wears the number of Darren Sproles. Phillip Rivers has raved about him. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's so little that he can burrow near the goal line and nobody can find him. So even if Ryan Matthews comes back, and he is expected to be back soon, everybody knows about Ryan Matthews. He can't play the full season because he continues to get hurt over and over and over again. So if he comes back from that injury, he could easily go down again. And San Diego's a team that has always wanted to use a couple of different running backs. That's why they went into this season with Ryan Matthews, Danny Woodhead, and Donald Brown, because they like that rotation. So even if Matthews comes back, Oliver could have value moving forward in that second running back role like Danny Woodhead was supposed to fill coming into the year. And another guy, put him on your radar. I don't know what's going to happen. It's somebody who you could pick up and drop next week. But Storm Johnson in Jacksonville could take that job, Dan. He played at Central Florida with Blake Bortles. There's a connection there. There's a chemistry there. The coach, after Storm Johnson had 4 carries this past week, raved about his running style. And Toby Gerhart stinks. Everybody thought, hey, he's going to get this big opportunity in Jacksonville. He's going to make the most of it. He is a disaster. He can't stay healthy, and he rips off like 2-3 yards per carry. They could be looking for a boost in the running game. Denard Robinson hasn't provided it. Toby Gerhart hasn't provided it. And Jordan Todman hasn't provided it. So Storm Johnson is somebody to put on the radar. Just stash him. Stash him and see what happens. If he emerges as the number 1 back in Jacksonville, then you've got a guy that you can play as a running back 2 or a flex moving forward. You have to be a forward thinker like that.
Speaking of that, we talked about people trying to turn their seasons around. So let's say you're just kind of cruising along. You're having a really good year. Your roster, everybody's performing like you wanted them to or overperforming. What's your approach in that situation? Do you still kind of stay aggressive picking guys up? Do you just kind of let it ride and see what happens?
If you feel like you have a deep team, Dan, the suggestion that I would make is try 2-for-1 trades, 3-for-1 trades. I'm always somebody who's willing to sacrifice depth for star power. So, for example, in one of my leagues right now, I'm one of the guys who has a ton of different running backs. I've got Arian Foster. I've got Eddie Lacy. I stashed Brandon Oliver before people knew about him. I stashed Andre Williams from the beginning of the season because Rashad Jennings has never been able to stay healthy, and New York is a team that wants to run the ball. I have Eddie Lacy's handcuff and James Starks. I stashed Jeremy Hill in case something happens to Gio Bernard. So if you're somebody like that, and this is the deal that I'm trying to pull off, I've got a lot of depth at running back. I've got a lot of depth at wide receiver, but I don't have that one wide receiver that really stands out to me. So I'm trying to take one of my running backs that I feel like can be expendable, a guy like Oliver, who I picked up, or Andre Williams, and use him in a package along with another wide receiver to upgrade either running back or wide receiver. In fantasy football, Dan, as you know, running backs are so hard to pry away from owners. So give them a little carrot, dangle that carrot in front of them, that running back that was hot on the waiver wire, then use one of your wide receivers and try and get a step up at wide receiver. Some people are frustrated with Brandon Marshall at the moment because Brandon Marshall, he's been dealing with an ankle injury. He hasn't been what a lot of people expected. Some people used a high second-round pick on a mid-second-round pick. Second-round pick and Brandon Marshall, and owners are getting frustrated when he's not getting the touchdowns. He had that 3-touchdown game against San Francisco on Sunday night. Aside from that, it's been hit and miss. Target a guy like that. If you're willing to wait on a guy like A.J. Green and you want to see what's going to happen with him maybe, or Calvin Johnson owner is getting an itchy trigger finger because they don't want to be without him for 2 weeks, something like that. Try and go for that big-time home run type deal.
All right, let's do starts and sits. Let's go with starts first.
I like Ben Tate a lot this week. Ben Tate, Dan, boy.
Your guy.
Yeah,
I know
my
you're a
guy.
big Ben Tate fan.
So, he gets the opportunity in Tennessee, and he goes over 100 yards.
Yep.
He has a career high. I think we learned last week just how the Browns are going to continue to use this running back rotation. Ben Tate is the guy. He is the guy. He's going to get, I'd say, 18 to 22 carries. Kyle Shanahan likes him. Mike Pettin likes him. It seems like behind this offensive line, Ben Tate can be the guy that some people expected him to be in Houston when he came out of Auburn. So there are things to like there with him, not to mention he's playing against the Steelers. We all saw what happened in week 1 against the Steelers. That defense is just not the same. And it's been better the last couple of weeks, but I continue to go back to that week 1 game. Tate was 50 yards plus. Terrence West was 100 yards. Isaiah Crowell ran effectively against the Steelers. So the matchup in the favor for Ben Tate, and certainly the opportunities are going to be there for him as well. So I really like Ben Tate this week.
Who are you sitting?
Somebody that I would sit here just because in terms of matchups, I don't think it's great. We'll go to this Thursday night game here tonight. It's the Colts and the Texans, and Andre Johnson is somebody that I would consider sitting. First of all, he's not 100%. It's a short week for Houston, and he's dealing with an ankle injury coming into this game. So on a short week, that's going to make things tough for him. Not to mention Indianapolis, their defense hasn't been great, but what has been a really good aspect of that defense is that number 1 cornerback, Vontae Davis in Indianapolis, is playing like one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. And Andre Johnson is somebody who it seems like doesn't have the same kind of explosiveness, the same kind of juice as a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. So I think this is a night for DeAndre Hopkins because he doesn't go against Vontae Davis. Johnson goes against Vontae Davis. A lot of times, Dan, in fantasy football, as a wide receiver, you're so reliant on that quarterback, and we all know who that quarterback is in Houston. It's Ryan Fitzpatrick. So just too many things, I think, going against Andre Johnson tonight.
All right, Fantasy Football Insider, and of course, you can tweet at Chris Fedor and let him know your questions. Any fantasy advice you need, tweet at him 24/7.
Sure.
Right?
Always open, like 7-Eleven.
And of course, Sunday morning, we'll have some last-minute fantasy advice. That'll go up around noon Sunday, right before the Browns game. We'll talk to Chris pregame. So lots of fantasy stuff at cleveland.com/fantasy-football. And you can also join us next week. Again, we'll go back to 12:30 next week for your fantasy advice. For Chris Fedor, I'm Dan Labbe.